Welcome to my American History Notes, where I discuss conclusions I've drawn from studying American history. Conclusions you necessarily might not agree with or even be offended by, but at least you need to study these items, these people, events, places, names, dates, concepts to be conversant in American history, and that will be great. Whether you disagree with me or not, it doesn't matter. As long as you're studying American history and have an opinion and a conclusion, that's terrific. That shows you care about it. It's very important for us that we know about our history, any country that you know about your history, and the people that were movers and shakers, important people, and things, processes, and events. So we're going to start today. I'm in Lyndon Baines Johnson, LBJ's administration, um, and the Vietnam War. So the military advisors to Vietnam that we had in there with Eisenhower and Kennedy were about to be augmented by hundreds of thousands of regular troops. Johnson orchestrated an alleged attack on U.S. destroyers by North Vietnamese torpedo boats in the Gulf of Tonkin in 1964. Many say this attack was exaggerated or never happened, and it is a source of controversy, as Johnson has been accused of using this to justify a broadening of the Vietnam War. In 1965, Johnson ordered U.S. ground troops into action. And by 1968, the U.S. had over 500,000 troops on duty in and around Vietnam. Compare that to the number said to be waging occupation in Iraq, say by 2007, a lot less. However, in March of 1967, the Senate Preparedness Committee warned Johnson that he was overly restricting the military and falling into a communist trap. After a trip to Vietnam, Missouri Senator Symington stated that Johnson was placing abnormal and unusual restrictions on the military. American flyers were forbidden to attack Russian MiG fighters on the ground or to attack Russian supply ships at dock and trucks unloading military supplies in North Vietnam had to be allowed to get away so far from the ships before they could be attacked. It was really strange. It was like he was playing a game with one arm tied behind his back. Doesn't make any sense. But anyway, the country exploded with the increased pressure on the draft to provide troops for the war, just as thousands of angry and frustrated black people in the inner cities were marching, demonstrating, looting, burning, and committing acts of violence. In spite of the success of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, tens of thousands of American young people were marching and demonstrating against the war in Vietnam, and thousands were avoiding the draft to escape military service. An entire culture of music and movies against the war grew into a massive counterpoint to the patriotic call to arms. American society was being pulled apart in civil chaos. There has been nothing like it since. It was a decade of America falling apart. Finally, realizing his massive failure as a president and the unpopularity of his administration, Johnson pulled out of the 1968 presidential race. During that race, I heard Alabama governor and presidential candidate George Wallace speak at the Salisbury, Maryland airport. And just like Goldwater before him, I was too young to have a clue what he was talking about. The assassination of Robert Kennedy, John Kennedy's younger brother and attorney general, and an ardent opponent to the Vietnam War during that presidential race, was a shock to the entire country. I watched it on TV. I even filmed it. I have it on my computer, which you can hardly see it because it was a black and white television, but it was a shock to us all. It was a stunning event, and a sorrow, even if you didn't like Robert Kennedy, as I had seen Lee Harvey Oswald murdered in the basement of the Dallas police headquarters by Jack Ruby on TV. I also witnessed the chaos surrounding Robert Kennedy's murder. For a 12-year-old to watch over and over as companions cradled the head of the wounded candidate and cried over his body on the newscasts would have been impossible just 40 years before. Robert Kennedy was allegedly shot by Palestinian Sirhan B. Sirhan just before Kennedy was to have met with Yitzhak Rabin, ambassador from Israel, either that night or the next day. There was also a great many conspiracy theories surrounding Robert Kennedy's assassination in June of 1968. As well, there are many surrounding the assassination of Black leader Martin Luther King Jr. in April of that year. Another important Black leader, my personal favorite, someone I respect immensely, Malcolm X, had been murdered in 1965. The Democratic National Convention in Chicago was surrounded by bedlam and characterized by clashes between police and anti-war demonstrators. Mayor Richard J. Daley insisted that the law and order would be maintained. 1968 may very well be a dividing line in modern American history, after which law and order became a secondary consideration to ethnic, racial, and political toleration and compromise with those who insisted upon flaunting their disregard for the nation's laws and constitution due to an inherent distrust and contempt for the nation's institutions. The fundamental inequities that had developed over the previous 2 centuries in the United States had come to a head in the 1960s, and our melting pot, as it had been called, of many races, religions, ethnic groups, and political beliefs, had now become a boiling pot. America was coming apart at the seams. And we'll pick it up with the 1968 election next. Thank you for listening. I hope that you'll study American history and have your own opinions and your own conclusions. Doesn't matter if you disagree with me or my conclusions. Just think about it. And I hope you'll subscribe to my channel. Thank you.